me as your amazing, or one of the amazing Nerd Nite bosses. But I am actually many things as well, and tonight I'm apparently a crocodile expert. So one of the few things that I am is that I'm a recovering academic. I got my PhD a couple of years ago in reproductive biology, studying female health and menstruation, which was not on young Jarrod's bingo card, but love it, wouldn't change it for the world. I'm also a science communicator, so I talk about science. Like tonight I'm going to talk about crocodiles, but I talk about it all over the place. So tonight I'm not going to be talking about periods and menstruation. I'm going to leave that to Lex a little bit later on. What I am going to talk a little bit about is one of the other sort of careers that I have, is as an expedition guide, where I drive little speedboats around showing guests up and down the Kimberley coast, pointing out lots of cool animals and cool geology and things like that. So that is kind of the angle or side of myself that I'm going to talk about today, because I just got back from a trip about 3 weeks long, and this was my home for 3 weeks. This is the 440-foot long Pont La Perouse. That was my office desk. You can see the very ergonomic petrol tank there that I sat on for a long time. And that was my office for 3 weeks. So very, very cool, 400,000-ish square kilometres of absolutely pristine, untouched wilderness, and it was absolutely incredible. Less than or fewer than 40,000 people actually live in the Kimberleys, and to put that into perspective, Germany is about 360,000 square kilometres and has 80 million people. So that's 2,000 times as many people as in the Kimberleys in a smaller area. So the Kimberleys is very, very barren, very dry, very empty. But there's an enormous amount of wildlife there despite that absence, or probably because of that absence of people as well. So what our day sort of looked like was we would start off on our boats, getting them ready for the guests while the guests are getting ready, putting their life jackets on, getting the cameras ready, all of that sort of stuff. So we've got to prepare the boats, and once we've done that, we take selfies like I did with my friend Peter here. Sometimes we just drive the boats around and do donuts because it's really fun. And sometimes while we're getting ready, we also have a couple of animal guests, I would say, that sort of come up a little bit closer to us. But I'll actually go back and show this video here. This is one of the guests that visited us while we were getting ready. So his name is Nibbles. He's a 3.5 metre long saltwater crocodile that sat there at our Zodiacs, their small boats called the Zodiacs, for about an hour and a half while everybody was eating lunch. So he was sitting there hoping to get his lunch, of course. So this is actually a very common behaviour, a very common sight in the Kimberleys. The animals are very intelligent, they know the drill, they know that some kind of useless tourist might fall off the boat and into their jaws. So this is pretty common. So the Kimberleys may be really beautiful, but it's also terrifying, which is exactly how I would also describe crocodiles. So like what Haley said, that is exactly the animal that we're going to talk about today. And to give you a little insight in some of their biology, physiology, and why I love them so much, why they're so amazing, absolutely terrifying, but amazing. And we're going to talk about, saltwater crocodiles a little bit today. So, across the planet there are about 30 species of crocodiles, and in Australia we have two, the saltwater and the freshwater, or the salty and the freshy. And generally they live across the northern coast of Australia and down the eastern coast as well. And there are a couple of differences physically that we can see between the two species. So saltwater crocodiles, you can see that their scales, or their scoots, are actually a lot more, they're a lot larger and they're a lot more raised than they are on their freshie. You can see that there's this enlarged scale behind their eye called their high crest, and also that the jaws of the saltwater crocodile are actually a lot more stout, a lot more shorter and wider, and the jawline is actually a little bit bumpy. It doesn't really go in a straight line like what you see here in the freshwater crocodile. So in addition to that, the freshies get to about 3 or 4 metres max, or it's probably the most common size, whereas saltwater crocodiles are commonly seen up to 4 to 5 metres, so they're a lot larger. And if we go back to their jaws, They look a bit different, and that's because they function a bit differently. So being a larger animal with more thicker jaws, more stronger muscles, they can catch basically anything that they want, and that includes hot crocs. I apologise for the pixelated photo, but the joke landed, that's good. But also people. So this is a very, very real threat, and this does happen. This actually happened about 2 weeks before I went on my trip in the Kimberleys as well. So there was a case where a man was actually, well, the remains of a man was found a 5-metre long crocodile. And that crocodile had actually swum down from Queensland into New South Wales. So absolutely terrifying, of course. So 5 metres is a pretty big crocodile. But let me introduce you to Lon here, which is, or who is the largest ever caught, or largest ever seen, saltwater crocodile on the planet. A staggering 6.17 metres long.
No.
And, perfect description, nope. So, absolutely incredible, and also for scale, that is 3 Shaquille O'Neal's. Huge. It's huge. So, of course, with great size comes great responsibility. Great power comes great responsibility. With crocodiles being so large, they also have some of the most amazing jaws on the planet. And what we're going to see here is a video of those jaws in action. So, a lot of the predators that we think of in the wild do have very strong jaws, like the lion, for example, has a jaw strength or a bite force of about 1,000 psi, which is pounds per square inch. A great white shark is about 650. Humans are measly 150. And the saltwater crocodile tops the chart with the highest bite force on the planet of 3,500 pounds per square inch. That is, in back to kilograms, that's 200 kilograms more than a Ford Focus per square inch. So if you can bench press a Ford Focus, then you may be able to get out of the jaws. If you can't, then I am very sorry. So this is a pig's femur here that they're feeding the crocodile. Word of the day, terrifying. So they're able to crunch and completely, and really easily by looking at their video as well, completely crack in half the femur, which is the strongest and thickest bone in the body as well. So no problem cracking that in a pig, no problem cracking that in a human either. So they're clearly able to crush bone, and it's really no problem for them. Stop that. But how the hell does a 6.17 metre crocodile get anywhere near its prey? They're enormous and they've got that incredible bite force, but how do they actually get close to anything that they want to eat? And the answer to that is they're very sneaky. So crocodiles and alligators, or the whole crocodilian family, are masters of disguise and camouflage. So what we're going to play is a little game called Spot the Croc. And I'm going to put up 3 photos, and we are going to try and spot the crocodile. So first one. You can see it. Winner! Number 2. Also, keep in mind there's a crocodile in here somewhere. What the hell is someone doing? Putting an awning up. Couple of options here. Could be this, could be this, could be this, could be this. Here it is. So that is an enormous crocodile there, easily over 4 meters. And how about this one? Nothing, man. You're safe. And you can see these are 3 different environments as well. We've got really dried up mud in the water and a kind of like mangrove kind of swamp environment. And they're able to disguise themselves in all 3. And here's the 3rd one. Just see its eye there underneath the twig. So, incredible camouflage masters, and in each case as well, they've got a couple of their senses above the water or above the mud at any one time. They've got their eyes, they've either got their nose or their mouth above the water, and that is exactly so they can see where their prey is, like in this case, dinner. So they hide most of their weight and most of their bulk under the water, under the mud, while just having enough where they can actually find where their prey is. And I've got a couple examples of some that I actually saw in the Kimberley on my trip. You can see over here on the left, that's the head of a crocodile. That one was about 4 meters as well. And you can see just the tip of the head and a little bit of the back poking out as well. And I've got a video of one that is swimming, and not only are they able to actually hide themselves on the top of the water, but once they want to dive down, they can leave almost no trace that they were there. So there he goes, swimming, swimming, swimming. And gone. Terrifying, terrifying. So you may see a crocodile in the water and then you turn around to say, oh my god, there's a crocodile over there, and then you turn around and it's gone. Right, so that's how incredible crocodiles are, how adapted they are to their environment. Absolutely fascinating, and I love them so much. And here's another, it seems irrelevant, but here is another adaptation to their environment that they actually share with cats. And that is this structure at the back here called the tapetum lucidum. So what happens in our eyes and in cat's eyes and crocodile's eyes is the light comes through here, through the lens, and then it hits your retina, which is where all of those light-sensitive cells are. So it takes the light, turns it into a signal, sends it to the brain, tells you you're seeing something. In low light conditions, a lot of that light that goes through your eye actually gets missed. It doesn't hit the retina correctly. Sometimes it goes in between the cells. Sometimes it even goes through the cells. So that's why us, well, as a species, we're pretty rubbish at seeing in low light conditions or at night, because we don't have this structure here called the tapetum lucidum. And what it is, it's essentially a mirror. So that light comes all the way through, and that light that gets missed by the cells hits the tapetum lucidum and then bounces back to the retina. So those cells that either missed that light get a second chance to absorb it. And it's also why when you take a photo of your cat at night or a crocodile and you go scope it with light at night, that's why. Oops. Spoiler alert! Spoiler! The reproductive biologist is going to talk about reproductive biology. That is why at night you can actually, a cat's eye or a crocodile's eye, and some bird species as well, their eyes glow in the dark. And that's because that light is coming all the way through their retina, hitting the tapetum lucidum, and then some of that light is then missing those cells again, coming out of their eye and then into your eye. So very, very cool sort of little bit of science going on there, and it actually helps spotlighting crocodiles at night very, very easily. And spoiler alert, I'm going to talk a little bit about reproduction, of course, I have to. So let's start with courtship and copulation. So the breeding season for both salties and freshies in Australia is generally November to May, which coincides with the wet season. Can start a little bit earlier, can go a little bit later as well. And that is mainly because it coincides with the increase in temperature as well, which we'll go into a little bit later why that's important. Females mature a little bit earlier, a little bit younger than males do. And there's a bunch of different courtship displays and behaviours that crocodiles display. This is the same for freshies as it is for salties. Lots of chasing, lots of head slapping, growling, and even fights which can lead to injury and death. We've already shown how incredible those jaws are, and they definitely use them on each other as well. Crocodiles are very, very territorial, and they often have a harem of female crocodiles that they will protect with their life. So one of those behaviours could be actually going out and killing the other crocodile. But actually, how do those crocodiles know when it's the breeding season? What gets them to move, basically? Well, a couple of people found out last year that it turns out that it's Chinook helicopters. This was at a reptile park in central Queensland. And what was happening was there was actually an army drill, and there were Chinook helicopters, which, if you don't know what they are enormous cargo helicopters, really big, really loud, and they've got this really low, thunderous kind of sound that they emit. And they were flying overhead back and forth all day for a couple of weeks. And what that sounded like was thunder to the crocodiles. So those thunderstorms naturally indicate the onset of the wet season, because that's when the storms are going to be most common. So what happened for this crocodile park was it induced a sex frenzy. All of the crocodiles in the park, so they started doing all of these displays. A lot of them got injured. There was a lot of mating. There was a lot of all of this. And it was all thanks to the Singapore Army's Chinooks flying over. So I said before that males will often have a harem of multiple females in their territory, in their environment. So males will often mate with several females, and then those females will lay roughly 50 eggs, a little bit fewer, a little bit less in the freshies, but about 50 in the salties. So I mentioned temperature a little bit earlier, and this is exactly where temperature comes into play here. So a lot of all reptiles are not chromosomally, or sex determination is not dependent on chromosomes. And what do I mean by that? Is that firstly, in humans, for example, who are sex is determined chromosomally at birth anyway, that's because we have sex chromosomes, whereas reptiles do not. So in humans, for example, we can have this spectrum of different sexes assigned at birth. You could be male, female, and then everything else. You can be intersex. There's a whole spectrum of different sexes, but it's dependent on which chromosomes you have. And in crocodiles, and in turtles, and in lizards, this whole thing doesn't come into play. What happens instead is temperature comes into play. So there is actually a little expression with sex determination when it relates to temperature in crocodiles and in turtles. So in turtles, depending on how warm or how cold those eggs are that they've laid, it is cool dudes and hot chicks, or hot dudes and cool chicks. So in crocodiles, if the eggs are less than 30 degrees, they'll be female. 100% of them will be female, and more than 32 degrees, they'll be male. Everything in between will either be intersex or a mix of one of the two. So very, very cool, and a completely different strategy that we use, which I think is fascinating. And I don't know why that's so low, but about 50 of those eggs that they've laid, only about 25% of those actually hatch, because there's lots of issues with the temperature. For example, the baby actually will not hatch from the egg because the temperature wasn't right to determine a sex at all. Sometimes they'd be predated on, sometimes they were just stillborns, and there's a lot of issues that could come up, and only 1% of them actually reach adulthood. So baby crocodiles are one of the best prey animals for lots of different species in the environment that they live. So other birds will eat them, other crocodiles will eat them, fish will eat them, lizards will eat them, small mammals will eat them. So one of the best strategies to use is to actually stay close to mum and live in her mouth for a couple of weeks. And that's actually a very common thing that we see with baby crocodiles. They'll hang inside their mother's mouth for the first couple of weeks while they figure out where they are, what to do, how to hunt, and then mum takes off and they're on their own. But it's a pretty good strategy living inside a very territorial, very motherly saltwater crocodile about 6 meters long. That's a pretty good strategy. One of the coolest things that I think about when it comes to crocodiles is called parthenogenesis. Has anybody heard of that before? A couple of hands. In other words, it's cloning. So this, in a nutshell, is when an embryo develops from an egg without the need for sperm at all. So you don't have any introduction of new genetics into that embryo. And there are two different strategies when we think of cloning as well. One is obligatory, that is the only way that they can reproduce. They have to clone themselves. So some plants do that, bacteria do that. If you think that they just replicate, that's cloning. And some bees do that, and some lizards as well. And then there's facultative. So that is when they essentially clone themselves when they kind of need to. Not that they want to, or it's just when the situation kind of demands it. So that happens in condors, a lot of shark species, one would be leopard sharks, and of course, crocodiles. So this was, about this time last year, where a virgin birth or cloning or parthenogenesis was actually reported in crocodiles for the very first time. And unfortunately, the babies actually weren't born in the end, but when they did genetic testing of those babies, they were 100% identical to the mother. So, why clone yourself in a time of need? What is a time of need? Essentially, it happens in these species when either a mating season has gone not the way that they planned. Essentially, that could mean that the males around, they didn't really like them, or there weren't any males around at all. So, in a lot of the time we see facultative parthenogenesis in species that are very solitary. So sea turtles also do this. Sea turtles do something quite similar. They're able to store sperm. So maybe they mate with a male 1 year, and then 5 years later they use that sperm because the other 4 years they didn't like any of the guys. So there are other sort of strategies that animals can use in times of need. One would be storing sperm in turtles. Crocodiles clone themselves. Pretty awesome. And yes, that was reported for the very first time in crocodiles, and there are a few other species that we think might be doing this as well. Komodo dragons is another one. But yeah, it's a testament to how amazing biology is and actually how flexible it is in nature. People often don't think that biology can be flexible, but the crocodiles are showing otherwise. So thank you very much, and I'll take questions.
Alrighty, we have time for a couple questions because Jarrod doesn't know how to keep it.
I've been told to watch them and I still haven't. I've got a note on my phone that says watch them.
Alrighty, we've got another one at the front here.
What is the easiest way to differentiate the difference between reptiles and dinosaurs?
Easiest way to differentiate between reptiles and dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs had feathers. Dinosaurs are actually birds. So crocodiles aren't actually dinosaurs. They were around at the same time, but they're a different lineage. So birds are actually the only living relatives of dinosaurs. So a lot of the Jurassic Park, all those dinosaur movies are probably pretty inaccurate. I don't know, maybe we can go back to our archaeologist / paleontologist / anthropologist in the room who can maybe back me up here, but dinosaurs were actually related to birds, so they generally had feathers. So if you had a T-Rex next to a crocodile, one would have feathers and one would not.
Okay, let me get to the back, because I can never see. Let me look right past this person who's waving their hands in front of me. Okay, one up here.
So Coles sometimes has crocodile. Do I need to feel guilty about that? Where are they getting the crocodile for Coles?
Coles has crocodile, so you need to feel guilty for eating it.
So yes, they do. And this is kind of a flaw in how we've approached our management of crocodiles. So we're often encroaching on the crocodile's environment, and then we're blaming the crocodiles for eating us, right? So they eat our dogs, they eat our kids and things like that because we're sitting in their environment and we're blaming them. So one of the ways that people have tried to solve that problem is to take the crocodiles and put them somewhere else, but they just swim back. So option number 2 is to put them into crocodile farms and either let them live out their days in crocodile and reptile parks and things like that, or they're killed, unfortunately, for things like meat, and often for dog food.
And their skin also?
Yes, okay, absolutely. Skin, like there's still that trade of like crocodile leather goods. Actually, it's a really weird thing to say, but one of the, on the radios when we were in the Kimberleys, if we spotted a crocodile, we would say HB on the left, which is handbag. Because otherwise we don't want to be like, crocodile on the left, and then everybody's like freaking out trying to get out of the boat. So HB is what we said. It's a terrible way to approach. That is one, that alone is a bad thing, but the way that we're approaching crocodile management is terrible.
Alrighty, maybe 2 more. I think this one's been up a few times.
How do their teeth not break with that much bite force?
How do their teeth not break with that much bite force?
They do. So they actually do. So crocodile teeth, they don't have one set of teeth for their entire life. They get a new set of teeth every 20-ish months. So I think it's pretty quick. Their entire set of teeth basically every 2 years. So the saltwater crocodile's teeth are designed to be a lot more rigid and take a lot more force. So they're actually very, very thick. They're not hollow in the middle. They're completely solid all throughout. So they can take a lot of force, but they still break. But it's okay. More are coming.
Okay.
I just want to I want to know what the head slap looks like. Like what part of the crocodile's body is slapping the other crocodile's head?
What part of the body is slapping the other one's head?
So they're basically lying flat like that, and then they lift their head up and then kind of like slam down like that. So it's kind of like slamming down the bottom of their head on top of the water. It's not like they're slapping someone on the head. It's slapping their own head up and down the water.
All right, can you please put your hands together for Jarrod? Break, and I think Andy will come back up with the skulls and Jarrod will be meandering about, so ask them any questions if you want to corner them. And yeah, come back in 10 minutes.